We are extremely excited to begin day 3 of one-week national workshop on right to information, organized by Center for Advanced Studies in Labour Welfare at Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Punjab. I, Dikshi Arora, along with Yashvi Agarwal, would be moderating today's session. We are pleased to introduce our guest speaker for the day, Mr. Sanjay Vasishtha, sir. He is a partner at Vasishtha Law Firm and a practicing attorney at Supreme Court. He did his BA LLB from Jamia Millia Islamia and his LLM in comparative law from McGill University, Canada, and MSc in criminology and criminal justice from University of Oxford. Sir specializes in criminal and commercial litigation and regularly appears before Supreme Court and other courts for various high-profile cases as well as pro bono. So he's also a faculty member at various institutions, including Delhi University, National Law University, Delhi, Lucknow, etc. Today, Sir shall be speaking on right to information and privacy issues. On the behalf of Center and University, I welcome you, sir. It's an honor to have you with us today. And without further delay, I would like to invite Sir to address the participants.
Can you please unmute? Kunal, can you please unmute, sir? So there must be a...
Thank you, Dikshi. I mean, it's a common problem in courts. We are usually unmuted at the wrong time and muted at the right time. So we're almost used to this. I think, unlike, today was a miscellaneous day in the Supreme Court. All we get is what 2-3 minutes to either get our SLP admitted. I think we have ample time today, so I will not be rushing. I think ma'am was very kind to inform me that I could perhaps continue till 3:30, subject to your willingness to hear me on this very important topic, of course, and this might overlap with my former speaker, who probably spoke on right to information and privacy in detail. I mean, before we get on to the substantive law, discuss all the nuances surrounding RTI and PM Care Fund matter, which is happening in Delhi High Court, which is already sub judice, will not really comment on the matter. At the outset, I always start with a caveat. I'm a counsel to Delhi Police and other union bodies, so all my views are extremely personal. The reason I say extremely and not only personal, why can't be quoted out of context, that is a different role I play. I've been a counsel for NLU Delhi and otherwise also I'll try and use some of my own case laws as well during the course of our discussion. And ma'am, I hope this could be a discussion based, if I may label this as a seminar, where we can all discuss and debate, because I wish to equally learn 2 or 3 things back from your good institution, which I'm sure is doing wonderful under the aegis and guidance of Professor D.S. Vajpayee, one of my real-time role model in criminology. And I met him in 2013 at Oxford when he came and delivered a lecture there. So I was hoping to see him, but I'm anyways going to speak to him today. So thank you again, Dikshi. Thank you, Geetika ma'am, for having me today. I think I could speak maybe for a week or 2 on this topic, and that wouldn't suffice. This topic personally takes me back to my LLM thesis, and not to discuss anything which is not going to be of any academic value. But in Canada, there was a bill called Bill C-32, which basically did away with matrimonial privileged communication. Now, I will correlate this with the Right to Information Act in India. What was Bill C-32? Why does it matter today? We have a privileged communication. Let's say Dikshi comes to my office with a problem that I have a legal issue. I want to discuss this problem, and it's a legal secret. 126 Evidence Act. What is happening with the network? Am I audible? I think that's connected.
Yes, sir. It's fine now.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, this has happened thrice today. Well, as in when I start to say something important, the network also. But anyhow, where was I? I was I was on Bill C-32 and how Dikshi would attend my office and everything that I would discuss with her or Dr. Gitika or your Vice Chancellor for that matter is a legal secret because it's a privileged communication between us. Likewise, I think it's section 122 or 123. I think matrimonial privileged communication is under 123 of the Evidence Act or 122, not 123. 123 is regarding state and all. Anything that is discussed in India between a husband and a wife, I have argued in my academic articles that this should be extended to other common law partners. It should not be given a restricted meaning. We have a different. In Canada, this was extended to all form of live-in relations and everything. So that was the case. Why did the government of Canada in 2013, by virtue of Bill C-32, abolish matrimonial privileged communication or common law partner privileged communication? One of the reasons was that it always interfered with the right to information. One of the issues or the underlying issue that may interest us is the absence of data protection law in India. Now we know there is a data protection bill. If at any stage I go too fast or if you am incomprehensible, please do interject and ask questions. I'm sure. And I hope, Dikshi, everybody is able to unmute themselves because I see that muting and unmuting has been logged. Is it? So maybe. So I think right to information should start with this lecture where all the participants will have a right to inform themselves about their thoughts. And somebody has also shared a smiley on the screen. Pranjal has done it. So let us. So let us do it now. Why did it bother me and why did I choose that as my topic? Because I think. And then had Bajpai sir joined, he would second me on reformation and rehabilitation of an offender. The minute state agencies use data and information of a partner to secure a conviction, there is no incentive for the offender to come back. Now, you may wonder how is it related to RTI and privacy, the topic of our discussion today, and why is it even relevant? Privacy and right to information. I'm sure all our audience today is from a legal background. Is it correct? Are we all having a degree in law or some understanding in law? Okay, fair enough. What is a right? Now, we all studied a very boring topic in our initial years at law school called jurisprudence. I never really understood as to why I was made to study Salmond on jurisprudence. I couldn't understand one line. I mean, I remember, I recall spending whole weekend and the whole weekdays, in fact, trying to understand. I still have that book lying somewhere. But gradually, I realized that jurisprudence was, in fact, everything. Jurisprudence and in the rights and duties discourse, when we talk about right to privacy and right to information are both positive rights. Very, very important, extremely important rights. Now, which should surpass the other? How should we draw an equilibrium with the void? Obviously, withstanding the fact, I will always, at the sake of repetition, say that there is no data protection bill there is no data protection law. I mean, there is a bill. Bajpai sir had also authored a couple of articles he had shared with me on WhatsApp. I think we should all go through them. But data protection bill will, yes, supplement the law related to right to information. As on date, we don't have it. Now, insofar as this aspect was concerned, there in Canada, there were parliamentary debates. Their judges had, taken a serious note of the bill, but it was eventually upheld. It was then thought and construed that in certain cases, privacy will overlap. Now, this ambit was left with the judges there. They will decide whether privileged information should overlap or not. So in that case, government of Canada had bequeathed this power on the higher judiciary to decide as to how they wish to go about it. Now in India, we do not have those legislations. So far as, may I also share a PowerPoint? I will just share my screen. I hope my screen is now visible. Is it?
Yes, sir.
It's a issue because I think my video is off now, but anyhow, I'm just going to share the screen. Yes. So, taking our discussion further, we will start by understanding the dichotomy between right to information and privacy. Where do we stand today? Do we, because the minute you have somebody decide what constitutes a greater right in terms of privacy or right to information, that somebody will have some considerations as well. So, is there a barometer? Is there a litmus test as to how we should proceed in this direction? What are the barometers then, if there are some? How should we decide which right supersedes, when does it supersede, and how does it supersede? That is precisely our subject matter of discussion today. Now, we know that obviously right to information has been declared to be a fundamental right under Article 19(1) of the Constitution of India. This has been declared. Series of pronouncements have also gone on to then discuss the object of RTI. We know that there was an act called Freedom of Information Act 2002. Thereafter, it was repealed and a new successor, Right to Information Act 2005, was enacted, owing to the reason that this act was obviously obsolete, not very, very effective. 2005 Act was conceived to be a very, very important landmark legislation in the legislative history of our country. This is how it started. Just some basic introduction into the act. I'm sure you've had the opportunity to go through all these provisions. We have also had some attempts by the political parties to have their parties removed from the ambit of the act. And then we had RTI Amendment Act 2019, which gave power to the government to change the tenure, salary, and deduction of the chief information, which was allowed. This bill became a law. But the right and duties debate surrounding the right to information is a bit more complicated than whatever we have discussed till now. Again, going back to my illustration of Bill C-32 in Canada, which basically, which was again, the activist would label it as a very, very erroneous, infringement of very, very important rights. But going back to that discussion, there were some parliamentary debates, and it was decided that one has to have, now, I'm sure I can relate this entire concept to law of sentencing as well. As a criminologist, I think I will always go back to all those parameters which we often discuss in sentencing. Can there be a black and white formula? Can there be a pigeonhole as to where a judge would put in all the facts and circumstances, and the software will come out with a sentence? Aggravating and mitigating factors are always taken into account. So we will initiate today's discussion by saying that all these debates surrounding rights and duties discourse, both rights, when it comes to both rights, right to privacy or right to information, there will always be a subjective analysis as to which should supersede or surpass the other in what event or context. There cannot be one litmus test or barometer to analyze as to when one should supersede other. It will depend on case to case basis, and we will also discuss during the course of our discussion as to why this cannot be objectively verified. This cannot have an objective criteria. This will always continue to be subjective. So when we talk about rights and duties debate surrounding right to information, the objective is to have an appropriate balance between right and duty. What are rights and duties? I'm sure we all remember Salmon-Don jurisprudence or otherwise jurisprudence teaching us that every right has a corresponding duty. And if you think of it in a different context, if you think of it in a very different context, in fact, if I may say it this way, let's think of a state. State is providing the seeker of information with some form of information which is in its possession. State is equally responsible. State is equally responsible to protect the privacy of an information, privacy of an individual concerned. Now, where do we draw this balance and how do we draw this balance is of importance here. At the outset, I started with discussing Prime Minister's CARES Fund. I'm sure all of you understand that there is a litigation pending in the High Court of Delhi. This is in key news electronic media platforms. We see live arguments being posted there and so on and so forth. Now, two petitions are filed before the High Court of Delhi seeking to declare PM CARE Fund as a state under Constitution of India and that it got under the RTI as a public authority. Now, to my understanding, is it even relevant to have something declared as a state or a public authority? Yes, it will, if allowed to be declared as a state or public authority. Then the question pertaining to the definition of information and 2J of the Act, I'm sure you have read 2F and 2J, very, very important provisions. Then that wouldn't suffice. Sanjay Devan, the counsel, has obviously argued that you can't label this as a private affair and all. Now, since the matter is sub judice, I will not be commenting on the merits. But from an academic perspective, it is very, very relevant that we understand as to what both sides have been arguing, and then leave it upon our own subconscious mind to analyze as to whether this should come within the ambit of a public body, state, or something which is controlled by bureaucracy as per 2J, or whether CIC should have decided this first and then we should have gone to the High Court of Delhi and so forth. Now, what is the government saying? The petitioners' councils have argued at length that no, this is a public authority or a state. On the other hand, the government says that irrespective of whether a trust is a state or authority within the meaning of Article 12 of the Constitution, whether is it a public authority within the meaning of RTI Act, it is not permissible to disclose third-party information. They are then harnessing on the rights. That they are arguing that the rights of the other individuals are at stake. Now, I'll pause my slide over here for a second and get back to all of you. Let us now discuss amongst ourselves as lawyers, as students of law, since all of you have joined. What do you think, withstanding the fact that this is an ongoing matter which is sub judice? But let us understand, do you think that third-party rights or third-party right to privacy, and what do we discuss in this particular matter, is the amount of donation which has been made by donees in all their capacity into this fund? What do you think? Should their privacy supersede in your subjective understanding? Because this debate is obviously very, very prominent and dominant. What do you understand out of this? Are you even aware of this matter which is pending in the High Court? Let's all participate. I've already argued for many hours today.
All the participants have been given this right to unmute themselves, so they can, if they want to contribute anything, they can please unmute themselves, and the floor is open for discussion. Anyone?
I mean, I will go over your PowerPoint in a while. Discuss.
Good evening, sir.
Hi. Good evening. Good evening.
Sir, I do think that the right to information should be given the necessity rather than that right to privacy they are emphasizing on. Because ultimately it's the public's money and is being controlled by the government. So the exemption they are asking for the third party is not sufficing the requirement.
So I think you are again relying on Section 2 argument that this was within the control of the bureaucracy. Is it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Or should private account details, and as information as to who donated what amount. Is it something that requires consideration in terms of right to privacy? Or does the intention of those who are seeking this information matter in this subjective analysis? Do you think this should also be laid down as a criteria as to, let's say there is a lawyer who is an activist who is filing frivolous PILs every day. Now this person comes out and seeks information under the RTI Act. Is that even a relevant criteria? Because you know that the privacy of an individual may not be used, may be misused. See, there are many legal arguments, not to go on that section 2F or 2A and all. What do you
Sir,
think?
may I? Sir,
Yes, please.
I think sometimes when we talk about right to privacy, at the same time we talk about whether that information is relevant for the public interest or not. And private information is something which is related to that person only. But if there is some money somebody has donated in some particular account, and for some real objective, I think in that case it is not a private information at all. And if someone is filing frivolous complaints or RTIs or something like that, then I think there is a penalty clause as well in RTI, right? So that should be used by CEC, by the Chief Information Commissioner and all that, so that it should not be misused. Like it should be used. Like yesterday we were listening to day before yesterday, sir, like Sridhar Acharelu, and he said that if this act is not to be used, that is a major concern instead of use. I think that is absolutely correct.
Right. I think we should discuss this a bit more before the RTI tomorrow as to why Sanjay Vishist discussed the sub judice matter more than 10-20 minutes. Should that also be admissible in terms of the RTI Act? See, it's a very important aspect, and one has to really understand that the subjective test which is bothering us in this entire right to information debate, because when you look at section 2J, right to information means the right to information accessible under this act, which is held by or under the control of any public authority and includes the right to inspection of work documents, records. Now, these four broad parameters which are defined under right to information, one can very well argue that anything or everything is under the control of a public authority. When we say we live in a rule of law, when we say that we are governed by a rule of law, every policy framework are, obviously our right to life is subject to reasonable restrictions. And what are those reasonable restrictions? There is a shadow, there is a legal or which is always present. So everything is controlled eventually, or if not controlled, is always governed by some form of public authority. But this is again a very vague concept. One cannot embark on these parameters to argue that. So anyhow, it is up to you to decide whether whatever your opinion on the matter is, and eventually the court is going to decide this way or that way. But the government says that the right to privacy here, third-party information is paramount. No, we will not be obliged, irrespective of the fact whether we are a public body, state under Article 12. But what do you think? Is state under Article 12, are they supposed to reveal everything? Can there be a caveat to this? Is state duty bound to reveal everything under RTI? Reveal any information or every information? Have you heard of us? There's a law called any caveat to this?
Good afternoon, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, please. Very well.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
So, I would just like to make a point here. As far as my knowledge goes, there is no such provision within the RTI Act that explicitly mentions as to, when you were talking about the intention of the person who's seeking that information, there is no such express provision, as per my knowledge, that where you could define it, where you could draw that line, that, this is how you define the intention of an information seeker. If we talk about is a state under Article 12, if they are obliged to release all the information or not, they're definitely not. Because there are some matters which are private to the state and which should not be released to the general public for matters of security or whatever reason. But for
Official Secret Act and whatever.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
you're
all
right.
that. But to some extent, but if the general public is seeking information with regard to something that is being done for the public, I think if I talk about contributions, for example, if I talk about just like general activities or general things that are running for the public, why not? I don't think the intention of the person is actually would be frivolous in nature, or they would have an ulterior motive of something of that sort. If I'm seeking information with regard to something that is being done for me, why not? Why can't I ask for that piece of information? And why shouldn't the state release that information to me?
Absolutely. I think I would agree to a lot of extent with some obviously caveats, because this is again a very sensitive.
Sir, I would like to
Anybody
speak
else?
regarding. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I would like to speak about. Sir, as per
Yes,
Section 8(1) of RTI Act,
Yes.
Section 8(1)(a), information
Yes.
disclosure of which would prejudicially affect the sovereignty and integrity of India, the security, strategic, scientific, or economic interests of the state, relation with foreign state, or lead to incitement of an offense. These type of things cannot be supplied, sir.
No,
That
ma'am,
is the
absolutely.
section
That is
section
very clear.
8(1).
But this is absolutely true. But the only thing is, then everything in one's opinion could fit into this pigeonhole as well. We have to again understand that when we say that this is a class, this is a broad class. Can I say that 8(1)(a)
Sir,
that
only-
you have just read? Yes,
Yes.
please. 8(1)(a) that you have just read.
Yeah. And would you like me to read it once again, sir?
No, ma'am, it's totally in. I mean, today we lawyers are more into virtual court, so we have multiple screens before us. I got one screen to see you smile and share 8(1)(a. On my right is another screen.
Sir, but
there is
like
third screen. So I have
even there is one more in this thing.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
No, but
First
the
and
only
foremost, good
problem.
afternoon. Sir, even in that section 8(1), there is something called.
Yeah. Yes.
Sir, am I audible?
Perfectly audible, ma'am. Please go ahead. Yes, please.
Okay. If it is a matter of like, national security and all, then we cannot supply. But there is another clause in section 8(1), something called section 8(1)(g), wherein something called right to privacy also comes. Like if certain person he writes, please give me something about like who all joined in your office as MTS or LDC from such and such period to such and such period, their names, their employee ID, their promotions, their their addresses and all these things, that being personal details, we cannot supply to anybody, sir, like that, to any Tom, Dick and Harry, because this has got something, there is nothing called something public interest at large in this thing, sir. Somebody is working or somebody is staying in Andhra Pradesh asking for somebody, like many people working in Maharashtra, how can we supply for such people, sir? It will be infringement of right to privacy, no, sir? Details, personal details.
No, ma'am, there is a judgment. I mean, personal details of a
Huh.
public officer cannot be done away with. I mean, that is very clear. There is a case law. But what I was saying in terms of 8(1)(a) is that when we say that this is confidential, you have other laws, State Secret Act 1923 and all those things, Official Secrets Act 1923 and all those things. They will then narrow down the broader class which has been laid down under 8(1)(a). Because when it comes to, see, we will also go, I mean, if I may go back to my PPT, ma'am, you seem to have a very in-depth analysis and knowledge of RTI. May I ask what brings your interest in this law?
Sir, I have done LLM and I'm working in Postal Accounts Office, Nagpur. And right now I'm dealing with RTI. Just now I just dealt with this 8(1)(g), the same case which I was telling you. So for the past 3
Your
years,
postal
morning,
server
night,
is the postal server down for 3-4 days because we are unable to track any postal orders for some reason? Should I file a RTI to track my postal?
Sir, that you have to do it with the concerned senior superintendent of post offices, sir, of the particular region.
No, I'm wonderful to hear your views. I'm very, very happy that you have touched upon 8(1)(a), 8(1)(j). It is a good thing. I'm sure our competent officers are very well aware of all these provisions. Anybody else before on? Yes. Yes, yes, please.
So we had one case in our office wherein we had refused to give them this thing, what to say, refused to furnish information under 81H. There was an employee and he died, and we came to know later on that he has 2 wives. But as per section 11 of Hindu Marriage Act, that second marriage is void ab initio. But this so-called person who, employee who died, what he did, the first wife का name नहीं रखा, and he has not put it as a nomination in the service book, and he put the name of the second lady. And whenever he used to take a LTC or anything, he used to declare first wife's name and the second lady's name, and he used to take the second lady with him. So the matter came to the notice when this person died, and when the second lady, she came and saw the service book, and she said, my name is there, so you give the Xerox copy of the service book. So that we got the investigation done, and we came to know that she also misappropriated money from LIC, wherein the legally wedded wife was actually, her name was there. So then I refused to furnish this Xerox copy of service book under section 81H, wherein it is clearly stated information of investigation. So these type of cases we are dealing over here.
Very, very well said. I
Section
think
8
wonderful
very
example.
important, sir, this section 8.
Ma'am, in fact, I personally feel this lecture should continue from your end. I think it's a very, very, very nice illustration. 8
Sir, I
H is
dealt more than
extremely well put. Extremely well put. I must say. I mean, see. I mean, let's say I'm doing a matter or drafting a Delhi police opinion. I think I would never have this covered in the RTI and all. And you are absolutely right, because most of our opinions, at least in my capacity as a counsel for Delhi Police, they would fall within 81H as well. And I think it's a very, very nice example. We should always remember, irrespective of the first or second marriage. I think there's been a recent Supreme Court judgment that even the woman married in a void marriage rights. Recently, there was a judgment to that extent, but there was some prosecution or investigation from your end. Now, going back to the topic at hand. Yes. Now, I'm just going to screen share again. Okay. I think we have discussed this case. Now, let's proceed. Are we aware of this BCCI case? I'm sure all of you have had some awareness on this matter. There is a case where obviously BCCI has also come under the ambit of RTI. This was again a very contested matter, contested litigation as to why this was not included. We know Section 2F of the Act defines information that says that information can be retrieved which belongs to any private body which can be accessed by a public authority under the law being in force. Now, interestingly, there is a case DAV College Trust and Management Society versus Director of Public Institution and others. I will provide you with citation as well, where the Supreme Court held that NGOs and other private institutions receiving substantial government funding come under the ambit of RTI. Now, what comes under the ambit of RTI? Although, see, when we talk about control in 2J, it has been given a very broad interpretation. I think financial control, or when some government body or agency is funding a private body directly, indirectly, to a larger extent, in that eventuality, as per DAV College Trust and Management case, this will fall within that ambit as well, and this will obviously be considered in that larger context where RTI Act would have applicability on such private institutions. Now, there is no direct financial assistance to BCCI by central government, but it was granting concessions in income tax, customs, etc. So even the land which was provided was at a very highly discounted price, and this is why it was then considered that BCCI comes under the ambit of RTI and will also improve ethical standard and discipline in the game, promote efficiency in the management of BCCI, provide accessibility and transparency, prevent conflict or interest situations. I think, if I may say, that at times the fear of RTI alone and the fact that privacy cannot supersede as a right in general when it comes to larger public interest. RTI alone has been acting as a deterrent measure. RTI has been used to deter public institutions, public bodies from misusing their power and position. This has also been considered, and this has always been a case. And this is where all these things come into picture. Now, the information privacy interplay. There is a judgment again, K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India, that right to privacy we know has been a fundamental right. It has been considered to be a fundamental right. And this was pronounced in 2017, but that has been so from a long time. Now, a real challenge occurs when right to privacy and information are at crossroads, and enforcement of any one would lead to other being overridden. Now, to resolve this, Section 81J, I think Madam also referred to 81J, but what does 81J talk about? 81J basically paves the way for right to privacy by restricting the disclosure of information which interferes with the privacy of any individual, unless, this is the main litmus test, unless it is required for greater public good. And who decides this? The bodies which decide this has been given in 81J itself, Central Public Information Officer or the State Public Information Officer or the appellate body, as the case may be. This is one parameter that we have to discuss. In Girish Ramachandra Deshpande versus CIC, the issue before the Supreme Court was whether CIC can deny the information pertaining to personal matters of public servants. Again, a very important aspect. See, we will see how judges of the Honorable Supreme Court and High Court and many other public institutions, what they do is they disclose their assets online. They disclose their assets on public platform. Now, that is again a part of their service record, their condition, which is a condition precedent to their employment. But can a private individual seek private information of public servant? Here, it has been held in Girish Ramachandra Deshpande, directly or indirectly, that, and you may interpret the obiter dictum in this manner, to say that yes, right to privacy of a public servant pertaining to his career, details of assets, liabilities, movable, immovable assets are again private information and is not covered under the ambit of RTI Act 2005. This is again a settled position. Now, Apex Court answered in negative and held that the documents pertaining to public servant, including employment letter, what did the Apex Court hold? Assets, income tax return, details of gift received, order, censure, punishment are exempted from being disclosed by virtue of 81J and qualifies to be personal information. There is a name and shame decision also. Uttar Pradesh administration displayed banners in the city of Lucknow which had all details of CA protesters, including photographs, so and so, so and so. I don't know if I should label this as a name and shame decision because I was actively working on this case and this matter was eventually referred by the bench comprising of Honorable Justice U. Lalit to a larger bench, where we, in fact, I had then worked on a hypothesis to claim that when protesters had entered on the streets, you can find the article if you Google it on a waiver of privacy. That was the article that I had authored then. When I say as a protester, when I enter upon public streets and without then at least a face mask and all those things, I am waiving my right to privacy because my identity is being disclosed. Then one cannot say that the posters are illegal. That was my stand as somebody who worked on this matter. The matter is also sub judice. But anyhow, this was at least then the case. The name and shame decision, the Allahabad High Court had set aside this on right to privacy ground. Balancing right to privacy and information, right to access to information, again, they have to be reconcilable. Right to information laws provide a fundamental right for any person to access information held by government bodies. But yes, they do complement and supplement each other, but we know that there is a potential conflict. We know that there is protection of personal data and access to government information, and and overlapping them is a potential conflict, which again will be sorted in my understanding of how this law works once we have the data protection law. That will supplement RTI law in great depth. We know that they have been complementing each other, RTI and privacy. They are not always negative. RTI and privacy, I think they are again very, very complementary to each other if we see them in a positive light. Both are focused on ensuring accountability of powerful institutions to individuals in information age. In many countries, both these rights are intertwined constitutionally under the concept of habeas data. Now, you may want to note this: a constitutional right that permits individuals to demand access to their own information and control its use. In many cases, two rights overlap in a different manner as well. Both these rights provide an individual access to his or her own personal information from government bodies, and privacy laws allow for access to personal information held by private entities. Now, let us say I have a application pending in some form of a government body, and I am not being informed about its progress. I can always move an RTI. This is a very fine example of this, and the government cannot say that this is a private information. I am not going to provide you, but this is my own information. Now, Madam was discussing 81H, where information would impede process of investigation apprehension, but the lady had alleged that her name was in the record and she should be provided with this record. And this was used to then refuse her the information concerned. Continuing with the complementary RTI and privacy debate, we know that government bodies hold a lot of private information and individuals have a better say when they want to access their own information. Privacy advocates have also used RTIs to, and this is very interesting, privacy advocates have used it to promote privacy. So RTI has been used as a tool to promote privacy by agents, activists, and advocates. How all these data are extracted, and thereafter you will see before the European Court of Human Rights, for example, here and otherwise in India, that these laws alone are then challenged. I mean, using privacy law to obtain policy information, there's the Article 8 of the European Court of Human Rights, which basically ruled that in cases where there is a lack of information could endanger their health. Lack of information can also be a potential tool to suggest government that here RTI framework should evolve and all these information parameters should expand the scope of information in these underlying gray areas where there is absence of information or lack of information can develop. So activists, advocates who even battle privacy rights have used RTI to seek data and then uphold privacy rights. And you can then interpret many other anecdotal illustrations to support these claims. Now we know that there are, decisions which basically companies use for marketing purposes and all those things. These are again, privacy should be upheld in such situations. Now, in India, we have a review of data by a single individual using information gathered under the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme found that millions of rupees were being siphoned off because fake identity cards in the name of children and public employees were created and used. Social audits have also played a very, very fundamental role in these aspects. And this is where certain conflicts have surfaced. That private data has been misused by illegal covert groups to then use that data to their benefit, and this is a bit of a concern when it comes to such RTI and privacy conflicts. Factors leading to conflict between RTI and privacy. We have discussed how records containing official expenditures, emails, phone logs, etc., so on and so forth. We know that many records held by public bodies contain information and identities who were involved in subject at some point. And it is useful to categorize this information as relating to their official capacities. Information held by government about private individuals. Now, we know that government also hold a significant amount of information about private individuals. This is why data protection or privacy laws were never conceived, at least till date, and now they are being conceived. Materials include a large amount of bureaucratic records with information such as sensitive information, such as rights relating to citizens' interaction with government bodies or for their taxation purposes, bodies for taxation and their healthcare. In majority of jurisdictions, most of these records are considered private. one also needs to maybe understand difference between privacy, confidentiality, and anonymity. Now, why is it important? Because when we say or when we refer to 818 that ma'am had referred to, what should be considered confidential? And this trifurcation becomes paramount in such situation because privacy, confidentiality, and anonymity are three different parameters. I will be happy to share this slide with the participants once this is over. But privacy in research refers to protecting one individual's right to control or access their participation. Let's say in a study, and this is how privacy is. Privacy is also an active conduct by an individual. Let's say I am trying to enforce my privacy. Now, again, going back to the Canadian example that I had given at the outset, when when well, let's say, sorry, I'm just going to stop the screen share and go back to all of you. In the context that we had been discussing, let's say that husband and wife in a given case or common law partners of same gender or otherwise as allowed in Canada or in the Canadian context, they have a certain right to privacy. They are discussing two things. Let's say a partner comes to the other partner and tells him or her that today, unfortunately, I had committed this crime. Home, our house where we reside after spending a day at work or otherwise, after working very, very hard, we expect some degree of privacy there. So privacy, again, a state is duty bound in the rights and duties discourse. Individuals have a right to privacy. States are duty bound to foster and promote privacy. Understand this dichotomy that I'm trying to make a balance here. I mean, for one, it is a duty to promote privacy. For other, it is a right to privacy. But what we see in terms of Bill C-32 is that individuals' right to privacy was superseded by a state's right to have access to their information for a larger public duty or good. And here I would want your participation because at least I had then authored a paper. I mean, it's on public domain, University of Toronto Law Review had published it. It's a very in-depth analysis as to why I thought this bill was unjustified. Do you think that the legislature of Canada, the legislation was justified? Do you think they were justified in abrogating matrimonial privileged communication or common law partner privileged communication because they realized that indoor crimes like domestic violence, other crimes, because in India we say that privileged communication will cease the minute there is a crime, be it professional or matrimonial. There the privileged communication was wide enough. Nothing that was discussed inter say two partners were allowed to be expressed in court. They had also debated on battered woman syndrome and other aspects, which I'm sure all of you will understand. But what is your analysis? Do you think that this particular instance of right to privacy of an individual versus duty of the state to then, and in those certain situations where the state felt, and not all in all those situations, what do you think? What is your analysis? What would you do if such a law is enacted in India or Section 122 of the Evidence Act is done away with? Let's say there is no, whatever we discuss at home, whatever document we discuss, and then when we talk about RTI, you will wonder. See, there are, let's say, I along with my partner, we are seeking some medical treatment, which is a confidential record, and I have disclosed this to my partner that I am going to so and so hospital to seek treatment every day. And in a proceeding in a matrimonial court, my partner then brings out this information that this and this fact is also existing. I will not be able to take this plea that this was a part of my matrimonial privilege communication, and this document cannot be taken on record. But in Canada, I can very well. in Canada, I can use this document to say that no, this can be taken into consideration. What do you think? In larger public interest, was this law justified?
So I believe everything has its pros and cons. Every law has, every provision has some things that are in favor of the argument, some are against the argument. If we talk about this particular law, yes, there are incidents that would probably not gain as much as attention the court should give to those issues, such as you just mentioned, rightly mentioned, domestic violence and all such cases. In those cases, it definitely is not a proper thing to be enforced upon on the citizens. And if I talk if I talk with special reference and in context of the Indian society to be particular, I think that we shouldn't implement it, because if we talk generally, Canada is also a much more progressive state than India is.
Is it?
To an extent, it is. In some matters, it's probably not. But so that's the thing. It's all subjective. I see it a certain way. Someone else might see it a certain way. But subjectivity would probably creep in every situation, every provision, everything. But with special reference to India, I don't think we should implement, or the legislature should implement such a law or something of that sort. Because there are millions and millions of cases that would probably go unreported, that would probably be completely against the women, to be specific. There are laws that we already need that are not enforced. And if this law is being enforced, then it would just outrightly be against the women.
Fair enough. Now, there's a concept called solitary confinement. Now, in one of my real life cases, there was an RTI by one of the, not one of the only wife, saying that where is my husband kept? Is he in a solitary confinement? Because whenever she used to meet him, he would complain that I'm almost, losing my self control and I'm unable to decipher. There's a book by Dr. Rohim Jan Gavlu. I think he is a professor of anthropology at University of Toronto. I attended his lecture once. He was kept in a solitary confinement for 40 days. He said that after 20-25 days in a solitary confinement, I had lost the understanding of life. I could not decipher life anymore. I don't know if I was alive, until he realized that there was an ant in his solitary confinement, and the ant was only visible for some time during the day. And he tried to confine that ant. And this is how unfortunate solitary confinement is. And this is not on solitary confinement, so we won't discuss the draconian effects. But the RTI was moved to the superintendent and PIO there, seeking details on the nature of incarceration. Now, I think somebody from the participants had touched upon 81A, or let's say 81H. Now, the second question is, if the answer comes out, is there any way to then make sure that the answer is not vague or ambiguous? Or, because one of the biggest drawbacks is that, yes, many a times the answer does come out, but it is inherently vague, deliberately, and we know that solitary confinement, for that matter, is a very, very, it's a mode to control many individuals inside the prison complexes. We don't have, in the Western countries, you have medium level penitentiaries, maximum lower level, and that is how they are incarcerated, unlike here. Now, before I share the answer with you, what is your understanding? Should jail authorities be bound? Is it a secret as to how one is incarcerated? Have you heard all these cases where the public authorities tell the judges that we'll give you some information in a sealed envelope. Why is the name of a victim of POXCO not revealed? Crimes against women. Why is a juvenile in care of need and protection, their name is not revealed? Can you draw an analogy here? Can you draw an analogy? Where am I leading to? Should that RTI be answered in affirmative, saying that he had spent 15 days in solitary confinement? Would anybody acknowledge solitary confinement? One of the questions in RTI was, is there a provision for solitary confinement in your rules? Is there a premise inside so-and-so jail which could be labeled as a solitary confinement? What do you think as participants?
Sir, is it basically when we talk about the question, isn't it like when we talk about in RTI, we ask the question, it should not be open-ended, instead of it should be related to the person. Like if we say that, have I done a crime for under which I need to go to solitary confinement, that should be in the RTI, instead of we are asking something about else, like if the information is related to the person, I think, and it is information which can be relieved in that context, I think that should be allowed in RTI instead of any other analogy of thing. If I'm right, I'm not sure.
No, see, ma'am, ultimately, if somebody is questioning a given authority as to describe their demographic details about solitary confinement premises, how many are into existence, don't you think this is not open-ended and very straightforward?
But on what ground we have to say no? Because if that information can be given, then it should be given. But if it can't be, it is under the, but it comes under section 8 in the exceptions, then it's fine. But at the same time, if there is a use of that information, only then it should be given, I think. Otherwise, somebody just asking every day.
Is it not useful if in the court the prosecution says no, there is no solitary confinement, but the reply comes out that yes, there are 3 confinement. You know, when we study law, we start by studying a fact and issue. What is a fact and issue? I studied this in 2009 when I was in a law school. It's almost been 12 years when we studied a fact and issue, which is again a debatable concept. You know, what is to be disputed? Here, the question directly corresponds to a geographical space or a fact. And then the reply that we had received, that there are rooms, but you cannot say that this is solitary. I'm happy to share that as well. Kind of vague only. And then one had to challenge and all those things. Eventually, we got out on bail only. So that dispute was then taken care of. The reason I had discussed this is that no 81A or 81H, as we had discussed, cannot be resorted to in all these situations. And one has to be very, very vocal about these issues. Information in larger public interest, and what is larger public interest is again subjective. But here, an individual's interest, which may correspond to a larger public interest, was being disputed. If today one prisoner is being sent to a solitary confinement, the PIO or the CIC or any state authority for that matter could not argue that no, this is not within the domain of larger public interest and so on and so forth, if this cannot be revealed. Here the issue is that even if one right may subsequently correspond to larger public interest, has to be taken into account. And this is how we have to understand privacy in a larger context. I mean, my slides are almost next to over. And I think in whatever little experience I have had in terms of RTI appeals and writs and whatever we have done, I had recently started working on a project with John Hopkins. It's a health institution in Maryland. And what was being done there? So let's say in the LGBT context in India, there are a lot of doctors who are treating LGBT community by conversion therapy, so-called conversion therapy. We were planning a PL on this subject matter, but we were trying to collect data on this issue. What is conversion therapy? It's a therapy, so-called therapy, which is illegal, inherently illegal, where blood transfusion, electrotherapy is given to a member of the LGBT community to fix them. Now, in criminology, this has a lot of problems. In criminology, let's say it's a vicious cycle. And see how we used RTI to come out with very, very strong details. And let us examine what those questions were and how we were able to come out with great detail in this area. There are so many doctors, psychiatrists online on Google and otherwise. If you Google conversion therapy, you will come out with many doctors. They are selling packages, 50 lakh package, doesn't matter, we'll fix you. Now, in criminology, I study a lot of causal mechanisms. Everything has an underlying causal mechanism. Let's say that A, who belongs to who is a homosexual, is being treated by a doctor, psychiatrist, using conversion therapy or its tools like electrotherapy. Now, science is very clear, medical jurisprudence is clear, it doesn't work. This may be a normal phenomenon as per the educational standards which have evolved. In fear, this person gets married to the opposite gender. Obviously, this is out of coercion and societal pressures that we all often discuss. Certain things are still unfortunately stigmatized. I mean, even otherwise, if I may say so, who doesn't have mental health issues, but we feel stigmatized. We don't discuss those things, We are afraid that our professional performances and everything and our professional goals and our personal goals may be subjected to scrutiny if we come out in the open and discuss all these parameters. And I think this is an issue in itself. Now, doctors who claim to treat this and obviously think of the domestic violence and vicious cycle when somebody is forcibly made to marry the opposite gender by virtue of conversion therapy. Now, we filed an RTI with many questions. And in fact, some of those questions were extremely vague to the Medical Council of India and Delhi Medical Council to seek details on all those psychiatrists who are into conversion therapy and all these businesses, their licenses, and what steps have been taken, what coercive steps have been taken by Medical Council of India to curb these practices. And a reply came that so and so people have filed complaint. How many complaints are pending? That was also our question. So and so people have filed multiple complaints on this subject matter. These people have been identified. These people have had their licenses suspended. These people have had so and so forth. Very strong reply. We were very satisfied. Now, this reply was again made a part of our report, which is again an ongoing project. But to give you a broader perspective of how privacy could not have been a ground, how a bona fide RTI, because otherwise these doctors will say that, this is again a subject matter of investigation or inquiry, 81H. Otherwise, it will become a very convenient mechanism to avoid information. So these things are very pertinent. And I am sure by now, most of us I think most of us have already had a detailed insight into right to information and privacy. But I'm happy to discuss any questions or hypotheses, or in fact, even learn 2 or 3 things back. So I think let's open the floor for discussion. I'm sure all of you have had a long week and look forward to a nice Friday evening or a Saturday tomorrow instead of attending this. Yes.
Participants can put in their question in the chat box, or you can also unmute yourself and ask the question. Sir, in the meantime,
Such bright participants. Are you all from RG and UL?
No, sir.
Some are from RG and UL. Some students are, no?
Yes, sir. So in the meanwhile,
Wonderful.
I had a question.
Yes, please.
RTI
Yes, please.
Act says that NGOs which are substantially financed by the government may be
Yeah.
included under the RTI Act. So where is the definition of substantially financed given?
Again, I think it's a very nice question. We can go back to the Deshpande judgment, where control interpreted to, and do refer back to that judgment where control has been defined. Larger control, financial control, control which is so imperative without which these private bodies cannot function. Again, this is a subjective test. It has not been defined, but one will have to understand. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, there is no precedent to this effect. There are some policy decisions. So it's a good question, but I think it will have to be subjective. It is not defined as such, in my understanding. And so when something is not defined in the act, one has to really borrow it from elsewhere. Is it defined elsewhere? Otherwise, judicial precedents will have to set it. Correct.
Okay, sir, thank you.
So I had a question. So
Yes, please.
there is this narrative that exists and that is being built upon, I think, I would say almost each and every day by the public authorities, wherein when you said that, even if I file for an application and there are chances, the probability is higher that I might get a very vague answer to the question that I've actually raised. At times that does happen. So what exactly is it that we are doing wrong, or what exactly is it that the public authorities are not accepting and they're trying to build on this narrative and this entire issue that, okay, you asked a question, we've given the answer. It does not really matter if the person who has raised the application is satisfied with the answer or not.
See, this is always a question as to what will constitute a just answer. The seeker will always continue to seek more. And I think that is true for our life as well. It's a never ending quest. But for the officer who is duty bound to render you assistance or to provide you with that information, they are givers. And we often ask for documents. I mean, if you can think of a RTI where you ask for certain documents, maybe provided, so and so forth. I have seen those photocopies have turned out to be bad in light. And in the meantime, the photocopies don't come up only. So there have been cases where, all these things are done deliberately. But it appears to me that in many cases or instances, there is always a quest to provide you with the most appropriate, or to in fact label it as exact answer as possible. The scope has been narrowed down, not narrowed down, because I mean, what is just information would also matter. You will see so many RTIs coming out with one-liner reply, and that is a reply. So if one is not satisfied, they have appellate bodies. Now, do we go to that appellate? Now, let's say there was overnight, let's say my house is in Greater Kailash. Overnight, there was a tower, 5G. Extremely, I mean, that day I seriously Googled whether there is actually some radiation, because till then I was not personally aggrieved and I never bothered. I was in fact very happy wherever I found 5G. And suddenly I realized that no, now 5G is not something which I like. Now let me just Google. Somebody from my RWO moved an RTI that who gave the sanction, is there radiation, who has allowed this tower to be this overnight. Oh, then there was a reply, a very fast track reply, that this tower has been sanctioned as per this bylaw. This is how many years, and the permission is for 5 years, and so on and so forth. And surprisingly, there was a answer on scientific ground as well, that no, there is no reported radiation. Now, the person who was providing this information may not have been scientifically equipped to answer this. But this information came, and just to answer your query, I think what is more reliable and how you intend to use that information when you choose to become an activist with that information matters more. Sometimes lesser or fewer ingredients of that information will go in your favor in a court of law. The court will interpret it in a different light. They will feel that the information has been deliberately withheld. It's a quest. एक कहते हैं ना, sometimes there is a saying, the more we open our mouth in certain situations, the more we I forgot the exact saying, but the more we reveal ourselves. And I think that is how it is, in some of the RTIs and all these situations as well. I don't know if this makes sense. That is my
Yes,
basic
it
understanding.
does. Okay, all right, thank you. Other questions?
So there are a few questions in the chat box. I'll just read them out.
Hello.
Yes, always happy to chat.
Hello.
Where is the chat
Good
box?
evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yes, sir. It was very
Maheshwari
nice
ji, I
session.
see that you've been very active. Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Sir, I have one thing to tell you that many times
Yes.
they are using this PIOs are using this section 8 as a tool not to give the information.
Yeah.
So they are merely simply writing a line that this is not covered under section 8 or 9. Many times they are using section 9 also. So they are not providing a valid justification or reasoning. So is it necessary to provide a valid justification and reasoning in this their denial?
So when they are mentioning a specific provision, Maheshwari ji, when they are mentioning, let's say 8.1, then that is the reasoning. They are expecting you to correspond to that provision and understand that reasoning itself, yourself. They expect you with so many nice books in your background to understand section 8 and 9. And that is that is unfortunately not right in my opinion. I think they should justify. You're right. They should be able to justify, but they are not justifying it.
I have read many cases that in which court has held that they had not provided justification, so it should be provided by them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, sir. And in that case, PM fund case, I have one suggestion that when person is making a donation. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sir. When a person is giving a donation to somebody, he is having some motive and behind that donation, that his donation will be used for good purpose or some purpose, then only he is giving a donation for that. So he should have a right to know that whether people whom he have donated the same money had used it for the very purpose or not have used for the very purpose, or they are using it for some other purpose. So the information should be known in that case.
No, I think it's a wonderful suggestion. You are absolutely right. It's their prerogative if they wish to use it, or if they, it's their right to see if their money has been used in the right manner. Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there is a question in furtherance of the topic, the issue that we were previously discussing. Where do we draw the line between RTI and privacy when it comes to people with constitutional position or public influences, especially people who hold a certain position of responsibility, and when certain information might be certain to public discourse, given they owe a responsibility of disclosure to the public? So where do we draw that line?
I don't know if I understood your question correctly, but I think your question corresponds to that gray area where constitutional bodies should also be bought directly within the ambit of RTI, and how should they be bought within the ambit of RTI, and
Yes.
if at all some benefit is to be granted them from not
Basically,
disclosing
those
everything.
constitutional bodies or personalities, they're essentially answerable, but are they answerable? That is the question.
Is this sign on the top left corresponding to recording? I will answer this when this sign goes next time. I think privacy and all those discussions, academic discussions, should not be recorded at all for academic transparency.
Got it. I actually got the answer. Thank you.
Such is life. We have to interpret answers under RTI, and you have to interpret answers when you ask me a question. Yes.
Rashmi, can you please take up the other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So there's a question.
Oh, sorry,
If
sorry,
you are
Rashmi. I will read the chat.
Yeah, it's written in the
Hello.
chat. May I read it out?
Yeah. Please read it out.
Okay, so it says, if we are asking for some information under RTI, will our privacy be harmed in any case? Meaning, will they store our personal details? And if they do so, is our information safe with them? Or I think filing RTI anonymously will not do, as we are seeking information from a PIO.
Sorry, your voice. I was just trying to find the question. Where is it? Participants are strongly requested to. Sorry, let me. If we are asking for some information under RTI, will our privacy be harmed in any case? Meaning, will they store our personal details? See, your Prabjot Kaur has asked this question. No, Prabjot, your information which is already in the public domain. You know, there was a debate. There is a UIDAI law that Aadhaar corresponds to. Few years back, CBI moved a petition that fingerprint corresponding to UIDAI should be accessible by law enforcement agencies, and that is for a larger public interest. It was denied. That it was very, very clear. The Legislative Act, the provision was very clear that you will not have access to any data within the UIDAI. Other than that, like lately, I don't know why somebody has started calling me at odd hours to say कि सर आप लोन ले लो प्लीज. मैंने कहा नहीं चाहिए भाई, प्लीज आई डोंट वांट लोन. नहीं आप ले लो. नाउ आई डोंट नो वेयर आवर डेटा गेट स्टोलन. आई डोंट नो. मैंने उनको कहा कि किसी और को जरूरत होगी मैं आपको नंबर ढूंढ के दूंगा, क्योंकि आप हार नहीं मानते हो, फोन अलग अलग नंबरों से करते हो. वी विल फाइंड यू समबडी. बट दैट सॉर्ट ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन व्हिच इज सेमी पब्लिक और सेमी प्राइवेट. What is semi-private? When I say my phone number is a personal private affair, the state will not reveal it. But आजकल क्या होता है? You go and eat ice cream somewhere, they will ask you for your phone number. I once went to Natural Ice Cream near my home. मैंने कहा यार बड़ी गर्मी है, जल्दी से आइसक्रीम दे दो. सर नंबर बताओ. मैंने कहा नहीं है नंबर भाई. अगर नंबर नहीं है, कहते सर हमारी आइसक्रीम नहीं निकलती उसके बगैर. So this is again a very funny situation, but very serious. Sometimes we fight for our data, but do you realize that you have been voluntarily giving up your private data elsewhere? Yes, थोड़े दिन पहले I started gaining some weight due to lockdown. I bought this Fitbit device. To have access to Fitbit, I had to put in my weight, height, everything, nationality, color of this, that, I don't know what all. Now that data, again, I will be offended. I will go to any extent challenging if the government had revealed it, but I've been voluntarily giving it to a private body. I'm sure you have read Air India data privacy breach, where Air India had accidentally revealed. So these are certain aspects which we might want to consider. Hannah, any other question?
Yes,
Yeah, please.
Am I audible?
Padmavati madam has worked very, very hard. I see that madam has been working very, very hard while wearing gloves and yellow face mask. She has almost swapped all the files from India Post.
Sanjay, may I ask you a question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hello, sir. Please.
I have been practicing RTA for the last 15 years.
Oh, wonderful. Very nice.
And and state information commissions also. What is my
Sir, your voice is
concern is
cracking.
that,
Am I audible?
yes, you are audible. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir. Now it seems that you are audible. Is he not only audible to me, or what is it?
He's not audible.
Hello.
Sir, could
Yeah,
you
because
please
he must-
try switching your camera off and then asking the question?
So Mr. Verma must not feel that I am dodging his question by, sometimes in courts we do this. whenever I'm so lately I've started again. This is being recorded, so let me not say this. Yes, Mr. Verma. Yes.
Yeah, may I start, please? The
Yes, please,
concern
sir.
is that
Please.
what I have seen in the orders passed by the commissions, they do not follow the provisions of the RT Act. They do not impose penalty. They just issue a simply warning. Even the regulations of the we have given in the
Sir, you share your number in the chat box. I will call you after this.
So your voice
Your,
okay.
but
The
this was
only issue is
something very,
that the
very
how
interesting, I must say.
these authorities are really paper tigers. Information commissions, CIC, they are just paper tigers. They are not doing their duty, and
Yeah.
the objectives of the RTA are just going waste. This piece of paper is really not working in practical sense,
I think
because
many
the
institutions
administrative
have been
body,
labeled
the
as paper tigers like NHRC and all those things. I mean, this is true, but they will have to work on it. You're right.
and every time they say go to high court, go to high court. If you are not satisfied, go to high court. Every litigant or an
Very wrong.
applicant before the information commission will not
Yeah.
dare go to high court because huge expenses are
No,
involved. Suppose if you go to some
absolutely.
medical,
And no, and one should
which are
always
valid.
remember, what I say and what everybody knows. Access to health and justice is only for the rich at times. So going to the high court may not
Yes,
always be
definitely. It has
feasible or
been
profitable.
on Sunday. On Sunday, if the court can resume for Shah Rukh Khan's son, can anybody can go to the court and will the court hear to him? Never. It never happens. Only privileged few are getting the justice.
Right. You're right.
It is every day it is happening, sir. And Salman Khan can get a bail and awaits the order.
I am not a big fan of
Then only
Bollywood,
passes the
Mr.
bail
Verma.
out.
You can say anything about
Everybody.
them. I don't care. I don't like,
I'm just telling you, sir.
I think
You already
they have crossed all.
know. You already know.
Yeah.
The only thing is that, sir, that we make the commission work. Because when I cite the judgments, when I cite the decisions, even then the commission does not cite those judgments or orders in their order. Recently, I had an issue with the commissioner. He refused to convert my complaint into appeal. I was representing someone, and there are many decisions from the CIC to convert. If you request the commission, their complaint can be converted into appeal. But that commissioner did not even mention that judgment, did not even go through that order, and did not pass any order. He simply disposed of the case. So that is the thing, that the RT is not practically percolating to the common man.
No, it's unfortunate. Let me know if we can help you pro bono in Supreme Court if at all your case ever reaches there.
So definitely, I would love to come to you, sir. I have been practicing lawyer in High Court of Punjab Haryana as well as in
Recently,
District Court.
Chief Justice of India and all those people said you should do these many pro bono cases. I think all of us are doing it. So keep up your fight. Such is life. What to do, unfortunately.
So I will share my number.
Please do share.
So can I have your number in chat box, sir?
Yeah. It's in the chat box. I will type.
And your...
All right. Any other question?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Yes, Mr.
Sumit.
Yes, sir. Sir, I have submitted tax evaluation petition to the DGIT Lucknow.
Sumit, only your hair are visible. Now I see you also. Good.
Sir, I am audible?
You are audible and visible both.
Thank you. Sir, I have submitted tax evaluation petition to the DGIT Lucknow. On basis this TP, I have submitted RTI application to provide action take on my TP. DGIT referred this RTI to concerned additional DGIT Allahabad. They had replied this ORG organization is out of RTI Act. Then I have appealed to First Appellant Authority. They replied to attend his office. In this situation, sir, what should I do? I am not able to attend because I am living in Ahmedabad.
No, but this could always be sent through speed post only. You don't need to personally attend.
Sir, they had replied me, you should attend 4th October on our office. We will reply you. What should, sir, I next enough?
So just request them that, technically this is how it had been. I mean, one would have to physically appear. I don't know if they have also started virtual platforms. That is something which I would also be happy to learn from somebody who can shed some light on this. But technically, if you are so keen on getting this information, find some time out. I mean, not everything can be sent on a virtual platform, because then activists will videograph. There are people in your background also,
Oh, sorry, sir.
which may be very, very, interested. They are perhaps also interested in this lecture. But having said that, you might want to attend it in person.
Sir, I have replied them that I am not able to attend you and there is no provision to attend in office. Please, my answer is not for this. Should I also done other appeal?
So, Sumit, let us wait for that reply. And you, since you already replied to them, since you have already told them that there is no provision, technically you can always attend. I mean, I have seen many cases where people have attended.
Okay, sir. Sir, they have posted on 22nd September and is dated by me on 5th October. They have given date of 4th October. How can I attend, sir?
That is very irrational. So if they, anyways, their conduct is on record, you know that it is impossible for you geographically, you're at a geographically distant location. So that is how it is. Let us wait for the reply. If they are not satisfying you with the reply, you will have to unfortunately go to the appellate authority with this, that this was unreasonable. They couldn't have called me on such short notice.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
If no one has any other question, can we conclude this session? On behalf of Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, I would like to thank you, Mr. Sanjay Vashisht, sir, for taking out your time and making it such an interactive session and giving us a better understanding on RTI and privacy issues. I would also like to thank our faculty coordinators, Dr. Gitika Valia ma'am, Ms. Shruti ma'am, and Ms. Sonika ma'am for coordinating this event. Lastly, I would also like to thank all the faculty members and other attendees who have made this such a fruitful interactive session, and I look forward to your continued participation in other events organized by RG Anywhere. With that, I think we can bring this session to an end. Stay safe and healthy, and we will see you tomorrow on the same time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, participants. Kunal, you can end the session.